This is the ICO Alert Podcast, a new special episode hosted by both myself, Rob Finch, and my brother and co-founder, Mike Finch. I'm your host, Robert Finch, founder of ICO Alert. ICO Alert maintains the only comprehensive list of every single initial coin offering. That includes all of the active ICOs that are happening now, as well as all of the upcoming ICOs. You can check out the full list on our website at ICOalert.com. On today's episode, we have Cherie Kloss, the co-founder and CEO of NurseToken, and Josh Clayton, the co-founder and COO of NurseToken. On the podcast, we'll be talking about their new cutting-edge blockchain solution that's developed to resolve the global healthcare issues, which includes this global nursing crisis or nursing shortage. As a reminder, before we get started, none of this podcast should be construed as legal, financial, tax, professional, or any other kind of advice. We're simply talking about a project that we think is interesting and think you should know about. We also have a new guest on this side of the podcast, on the ICO Alert side. It's my brother and co-founder, Mike. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Of course, anytime.
Without further ado, let's get to it. So starting this out, Cherie, could you tell us, what is NurseToken in your own words? What are you guys trying to accomplish here?
We're accomplishing placing the nurse credentialing process on the blockchain and lowering the cost of credentialing, having a faster onboarding, resulting in less loss of revenue, having the credentialing be portable and trusted, immutable, and to set the global standards for nurses to be able to work at a moment's notice, unlocking the credentials instantly for instant approval.
Awesome. Yeah, the more and more I read about NurseToken, diving into your white paper and your website and some of the content that you guys have, it seems like the one thing you're focusing on is trying to solve what's called the nurse shortage that we're going through right now. Could you explain what that is?
Yes. There's a giant world nursing crisis right now. Every nation, 8 of the 12 world's economies are experiencing a shortage crisis. U.S. and Japan have only a third of the nurses they need. UK, even less than that.
Wow.
Russia has half the nurses they need. It's definitely a situation that's never happened before, partly because of the aging baby boomers that are coming, to the hospitals in greater numbers, including some of the baby boomers, also the nurses retiring, which is the largest part of the workforce is above the ages 55. And then add that to less and less people actually entering the nursing industry. All those creating kind of like the perfect storm of a really big global crisis.
And why do the two of you think that is? Why do you think that there are less people entering and less people interested in becoming nurses? Are they paying people less, or has something else happened?
Yes, I think that the nursing back in the day, let's just say 50 years ago or even 40 years ago, when I was growing up, the two options for your daughter was to be a nurse or a teacher, and I went to nursing school, and most of my friends became teachers. But I think, in these lately, it seems to be like they're going into professions like technology and lawyer, and the women are becoming doctors, and these are really interesting and great routes and career routes that they're achieving, but it's also leaving the gap of the essentials that help run society. Like nurses don't make as much money as a doctor does. Nurses don't make as much money as a lawyer does. So these careers need to increase in salary, or else just no one's going to go into it. And that's also part of how we hope to solve, using our token, some incentives to get nurses to work and want to enter into the profession. It's a really hard job. There's no one is going to tell you that being a nurse is an easy route to go. you're always giving of yourself and your time, and it's emotional and it's exhausting. And it's a service, essentially, to society. And it's one of those things that can't be replaced by AI or a computer. It's one of those careers that's going to be here no matter how much the technology seems to replace other careers, but it's not going to be ever replace nursing. So we definitely need to make some changes in the career itself in terms of making it more of an enticing career, and also maximizing the current workforce to incentivize them to work as much as they want to work, have flexible hours, and make more money per hour. And that's part of what my two businesses are doing. And hopefully, as it grows in adoption, the cycle of the low wages will start to turn to valuing the nurse and helping them make the money they need. We're here for the nurses to empower them to bring the nursing profession to the forefront of importance, and to help the world realize that, without nurses, this world's in a whole lot of trouble. So we need to start doing something now. And I see it as a social good, a social purpose platform as well, because we are here to help increase the nursing profession and make the world see that they need to invest in them now.
Yeah, that's great. It's a really awesome thing that you guys are doing. You had mentioned kind of that incentive structure that you're working on, and throughout your website and your white paper, you mentioned that the current solution is really clunky, slow, it's expensive. It involves staffing agencies for contractor nurses. How exactly is NurseToken kind of flipping the script here and incentivizing all of this good to happen?
Yeah, currently the nurse credentialing process can be very arduous and super expensive. I know that because I have a nurse agency business in the U.S. that is called SnapNurse, which is an on-demand platform to book nurses through an app. And in that platform, we have to credential thousands of nurses to be ready to be booked at a moment's notice. And so the process can take weeks to complete. In worst case scenarios, when there's a complicated work history or hard to find documents, it can take months. And that's just lost income for a nurse that they can't be working. But more importantly, it's also loss of income for a hospital who has empty rooms. If they close a room, they lose an average of $2,000 a day, and also the patient suffers, right, because they can't get care. So one of the ways we plan to help with by creating the NurseToken credentialing system is to put the things that don't need to be repeated over and over again on the blockchain. For example, right now, if I were to do my credentialing process to take 3 weeks, and then I were to want to change jobs and go to another hospital, or even another hospital within the same hospital system, I would have to do that whole 25-step process over again, starting from scratch. And
oh, wow.
Yeah.
So each hospital has their own credentialing process?
Yes, it's 90% the same every single time. It's ridiculous that just across the street they have to then call every single person at every single place you've ever worked. And one time I was actually hung up for like 3 months because they couldn't get a hold of this small Alabama hospital they had worked at 18 years ago. And I was like, they better answer the phone so I can get to work. But and you think about the poor HR department, even in that little Alabama hospital, having to always, answer the phone to have me work at yet another hospital. And I was a contract worker, so I worked at many, many different hospitals. So it's a huge pain point for a lot of these agency nurses. And agency nurses are the most portable. They're the ones that go from place to place to place, and they need to have portable credentials. It's a huge headache. And the whole nursing industry is actually moving toward a more gig portable economy, which, is evident by the amount of spend that the U.S. had last year. Believe it or not, $13 billion was spent on nurse agency nurse agency workers last year. And each large hospital spends anywhere from $2 to $3 million a month in nurse agency spend. So you can see that a lot of hospitals are now, some have even half of their staff as agency workers. It's great for the nursing profession because they make more money per hour and they have flexible hours. So in that way, it's actually moving the industry in a positive direction in terms of salary. Because as the nurse agency workers make more money, so do the full-time workers. So it's actually pushing the salary envelope up. So that's a positive thing. But anyway, back to putting the credentials on the credentialing system on the blockchain. What we hope to do is to decrease the time to onboarding by basically allowing the credentials to have an immutability in terms of some of the approval processes, and to allow for a more trusted system where a hospital could use token to unlock the credentialing packet and they know that it hadn't been tampered with or changed, or they know that it's secure and encrypted. They also know that there's a global standard there that has been met for that country. And currently in the U.S., we're using the JCAHO standard, which is the highest standard that is established in the U.S. So that's how we would like to put the power back in the hands of the nurses. Right now, each hospital system and even each hospital has all their own data. And so the nurse has to keep repeating it over and over again every time they go to a new system. And even like emergency workers are hung up on this. I did a talk at Johns Hopkins about 3 weeks ago, and FEMA, one of the directors of FEMA, was in the audience and afterwards came up to me and said, hey, this is really important because we had workers sitting on the sidelines like scribbling for 3 weeks trying to get credentialed just so they can start helping out. And I thought, that's not a good situation. He says, if we had someone that can unlock the credentialing, instantly and see that all the documents were there and ready to go, wow, that would be really incredible.
Right. Yeah. Can we, Cherie, can we back up just 1 second for those listeners who, like myself, don't have as much experience or understanding about kind of how healthcare is working. So obviously nurses are kind of on this contract basis. They're working with these agencies. That sounds like it's bringing some benefit to nurses, with the higher pay you had mentioned. Is NurseToken more trying to kind of reestablish a new process, or just better the current contract process? And what are some other contextual pieces, for those out there to understand, to have a real good indication of what NurseToken is doing?
Well, what we want to do is help speed onboarding of nurses and have instant approval of nurses in all industries. For example, the nurse agency industry is just one vertical, one example of a vertical in nursing that could use it, right? That's portable nurses that want to travel around and have instant approval and credentialing at a hospital. But it can also live in the home healthcare industry, which would be people who would want to access it to have a nurse come take care of their elderly mother or grandmother, right, in their home, but want to just verify that they're an actual real nurse with trusted credentials, and they could pay tokens to access their credentialing packet as well. And another vertical is telemedicine, which is really prominent around third world countries, to get actual real nurses to give advice through the web. And lastly, a vertical would be emergency aid. One of our advisors was North American Director of Islamic Relief. They were in 26 countries, and they said they've been looking for a system like this for instant approval and credentials of nurses for a long time. So when you look at the system as a whole, what we do is basically lower the cost of credentialing, because it costs about $1,000. I actually read some articles up to $1,500 a nurse to credential them. And it's a shame that people have to keep, incurring that cost over and over again. If they could just be placed once into a blockchain and just updated with updated records, then it would be not only save businesses money, but save time and money for the nurse in terms of getting to where they want to be. So we want to decentralize that and put the power back in the hands of the nurses, where they could carry these portable credentials anywhere they want to go, even outside of the nurse agency, to work for emergency relief or et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That help.
Yeah, I can definitely see the power there of kind of, eliminating that need to continually do the same process over and over. And Josh, I'd like to hear from you on this question as well. What's the purpose of the actual token itself? Why do you guys need a token in this business model?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of different use cases for the token. First, we feel like we will use the token to provide an incentive to facilities, healthcare facilities, to be early adopters of the token. So they'll be, or of the credentialing system, because it will be a change and it will need to replace some legacy systems and we'll need some proof of concept. So early on, we would find some supportive facilities that would be willing to essentially earn token by credentialing nurses and helping build our blockchain and that sort of thing. So that's one way to use it. Another part of it is that facilities, especially for contract nurses, there's no way for them to earn like incentive compensation or stock options or anything like that. So as facilities earn or purchase nurse token, they'd be able to kind of tie some incentive compensation to performance metrics, whether it's 10 5-star shifts or that sort of thing. So that's kind of how we see it flowing throughout the system. We also expect that users of the credentialing system would be able to pay. They're not going to be required to pay in nurse token, but there would be some benefits associated with a third-party staffing agency paying in the token, because it would, it'd have certain efficiencies attached to it.
So what's stopping a hospital now, say if they want to give a bonus to somebody? I imagine they could do that just, on that nurse's normal paycheck. Why do they need to go through that whole process of buying nurse tokens and then sending the nurse tokens to the nurse, who then cashes those out? Why is the token sort of necessary there versus just using, a bonus on a regular paycheck?
Sure. I mean, there's nothing stopping them from doing that. One thing we do want to do, and that Cherie can speak to really well, is just the nursing community has a very strong kind of ethic and pride in their work. And so we think there will be a lot of support of people just wanting to kind of buy into the profession essentially through our token. But, there's a variety of ways, obviously, that somebody could be compensated, including regular cash. But we just think it would be a nice addition and fits pretty easily into the solution that we're already building. And our own nurses on the Snap Nurse side have been enthusiastic about it. So it's something that, especially with the growth of crypto over the last couple of years, has been found pretty attractive amongst our nurse population.
Nurses are one of the largest workforces in the world. People don't realize just how vast it is. And they're also one of the most dedicated to their profession. There's a saying that no matter what, once a nurse, always a nurse. It doesn't matter if you become a doctor or if you become the CEO of a hospital. At the end of the day, you are a nurse. And so there's a tremendous community around the identity of a nurse. And so it's the same, I guess, reason why people ask me, why did you call it nurse token instead of credential token or cred token or something like that? And I said, because I want to rally the nurse community, because people don't realize that nurses are the ones that are driving the medical field. If you go into and talk to doctors, hospitals, the nurses are in all the top positions. The nurses are the ones that are driving medicine right now. And doctors, sure, they're a big part of it, but they know they can't do half the things they need to do unless they have the nurses on board and with them. So they're becoming a very powerful force. And I want to continue to elevate their profession by calling it nurse token and rallying the community around their own currency. Whatever the nurses value, everyone will follow in terms of the medical system. The nurses are in the driver's seat, especially now with the shortage. And when I did a survey, because I wanted to make sure that this was even something they wanted, not something I'm just making up. I did a survey of all my nurses, and it was CNOs, and CNOs are chief nursing officers as well as nurses. And I asked them if they want a universal credentialing system. Of course, all of them said yes, 100%. And then I asked them, how many of you would want cryptocurrency bonuses? And 91% said yes, right? There are, of course, there's some not familiar with it or wouldn't want to bother with it. So there's 10% that wouldn't want that. But 91% was large enough for me to realize that this would be something that they would want. And whatever the nurses say they want, that's what the hospitals are going to be incentivized to help them, give them what they want.
Right.
They want to, feel invested in their own profession. And I think this is a way for the world to get behind the nurses and to buy the tokens to support the industry.
Interesting. Okay. I'll give you an example here. We're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. ICO Alert's based here. And healthcare is really monopolized by two major players, UPMC and Highmark. That creates a lot of friction. They're kind of large monopolies in the industry here. What is NurseToken doing to kind of break down the barriers that exist kind of on this monopoly level, but then also with the nurses themselves? These are folks who are overworked and underpaid. Perhaps they don't have the time to kind of go through this process. How is NurseToken making this as frictionless as possible?
Well, the U.S. is actually moving toward universal credentialing right now. In fact, they've enacted something called the Compact State Licensure. That's a licensure that allows 26 states within the 26 states that have opted in to work anywhere in those 26 states with that same state license. And Georgia is now one of them. And that's where we've rolled out our one of our companies, SnapNurse. And so that's showing right there that you think that if you have a shortage in your state, why would you open up all your nurses to go to other states? Right. That doesn't make any sense. But I tell you why they did that. They did that because their shortage is so dire that they're hoping that other states have nurses that they can share to them, and they want to quickly onboard them and allow them to work quickly in their state. And if they had to do a new state licensure, that could take months. Like sometimes for California, it can take like 6 months actually to get a new state licensure. So the U.S. is moving toward universal credentialing, and we're catching the wave now. Our timing is just right to get quick adoption, and it's all being driven by the shortage. So people are willing to put aside their, hey, I'm going to share with you because you're going to share with me now. And that kind of mentality is now taking hold. And I've been in the nursing, been an anesthetist for almost 20 years. And it's just, this compact licensure has just come on the forefront in the last bit here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that something that you think, the government stepping in and kind of solving this problem? And is that something you think could make NurseToken and this credentialing platform obsolete? Or do you think you can actually work alongside the government in some way?
Yes. No, I mean, that's just one piece of 25 pieces. I mean, the licensure is the one that usually hangs up the most in terms of onboarding, but there's still all those approval processes like verifying all the different work locations, verifying all the immunizations, verifying drug urine tests, all these there's multiple steps besides just state licensure. That's just only one little step in the piece, but at least it shows that, even states are willing to now share data or share licensing in order to help solve the crisis that's starting to occur now in the U.S.
Yeah, so that's a trend of opening up supply more to meet demand, like you see across any number of industries or apps or whatnot in the sharing or other economies. So that's one trend that we think is highly supportive. And then when you combine that with the trust factors and other benefits of blockchain, we feel like we're out ahead of where everything's moving. That'll be highly supportive of what we're trying to do.
And not only that, I want to mention that it's now become a global nursing economy, not just in the U.S., but
interesting.
Nurses coming from the Philippines. In fact, did you know that 24% of the world's nurses are Filipino?
Wow.
I mean, that's Philippine nurses are going everywhere in the world economy. And we have Filipino nurses, nurses from India are going to the UK. We have nurses from even Nigeria coming to the U.S.
Wow.
It's global migration, and it's especially going to like Saudi Arabia. They make more money per hour, and they're, because of the shortage, they're really recruiting from even outside of the U.S. just to get the rooms filled. So you can imagine if I can, through NurseToken, establishing a standard, which 90% of it is the same. Like I said, even globally, it's the same type of things. What's your work experience? What are your credentials? What types of certifications do you have? These things are all global standards. So you can establish a global standard with NurseToken. This could be incredible for the world as a global economy in the nursing industry. And, NurseTokens becomes more and more valuable as the global nurse economy comes onto the platform, because it'll essentially become the largest platform in the world to house a global nurse economy, nurse community, and their credentials. So that's part of the value of the platform.
Yeah, that's great. I want to talk a little bit here about the platform itself. In your white paper, you mentioned you're looking to base this on the ERC20 standard on the Ethereum network. And while we don't have your CTO, Joseph, here, there are some really interesting things that NurseToken is doing. There's a middleware component that is involved, and then NurseToken is open to other blockchain platforms as they mature, running atomic swaps and all that fun stuff. Could you talk a little bit more about the platform and the technology itself, and maybe a little bit about why the technology is making some things possible that wouldn't have been possible before?
Sure. Yeah. And that's another component that we feel like we're really well positioned for. As you mentioned, our CTO is Joseph Jonas, who has a very extensive background in a variety of technology components, but especially in distributed ledger and blockchain development. He has been focused on that for several years and has built a lot of that middleware and his own proprietary system, essentially, that we will look to implement in doing all of our smart contracts, implementing credentialing processes that don't require configuration by a user on the hospital side. So lower the hurdles to get involved and use our system without needing like a coding background or any sort of extensive technological knowledge. So we think that will be huge in terms of adoption. That, and then he has a extensive suite of microservices that should allow us to kind of quickly implement the different integrations that we'll need to do with the third-party data providers of the credentialing process. That, and to kind of start implementing the nurses earning and storing the tokens. So we've been fortunate to have him on the team and be so far down the road in terms of getting the actual platform and all the components completed. And so that's
great.
Yeah, down the road significantly. Right now we are on Ethereum. We're saying, that's kind of our default position, but we've been in some pretty extensive discussions with Ontology out of China, and Cherie could talk a little bit about that in more detail, but they have a private public blockchain component that really is complementary to the type of enterprise client that we would be talking to. And so they are still establishing their test net and getting their system up and running, but we have in all of our paperwork kind of reserved the right to adjust and find the best home for NurseToken and the credentialing platform.
Interesting. Yeah, Cherie, I'd love if you could speak more on Ontology and how you guys might integrate there.
Yeah, the very basis of Ontology is that it's a government compliant platform with digital identity. And for us, that was really important because, of course, we're dealing with health records and HIPAA protected things. unless the blockchain, can't be on an open blockchain because we just can't expose that kind of information. So one of the great things about Ontology and other networks that are emerging is they're building a private blockchain component to it where, enterprise can actually have real world applications to the blockchain where not all of it wants to be exposed. So Ontology has a private blockchain connected to a public blockchain. The public blockchain houses the tokens, like in terms of payments or access or, loyalty, things like that. And then it connects to a private blockchain with a delegated proof of stake. And it's basically allows for the company to keep, a lot of the encrypted data away and off from the public blockchain. So I think it's a little bit more practical for businesses to adopt that type of an approach.
Even if the data is encrypted, does HIPAA still require you to store that data in a private blockchain versus a public blockchain? Obviously, I'm sure HIPAA doesn't mention blockchain verbatim, but we've seen a couple other sort of healthcare-based solutions that just encrypt the data but keep it on a public blockchain. Is that something that you found wouldn't work?
I think in this context, we don't necessarily need the data itself on the blockchain so much as we need the kind of the credentialed stamp of approval that various facilities have provided a nurse through the process, because through our private side, the facilities would be able to unlock the private blockchain to view these materials because they have to, no matter how they're delivered, they want to see the various components of the credentialing. So they would see that, but what the blockchain, the public component at least, would bring is that they would see that these credentials have been verified, by 6, 7, 8 other hospitals, and hopefully that would be what would clear the way to kind of reduce the friction in connecting the the supply of nurses to demand more quickly.
But we are also looking at other potential platforms, as I mentioned. We would like to, take a deep dive into EOS as they're building their security layer here currently. So as the different platforms mature, we're going to consider the different platforms. But the great thing about it is, even if they're in a kind of immature state, our CTO has built and it's been 4 years in the making of a private blockchain system that allows to integrate to basically any platform that is being built.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So.
Interesting. Yeah, it seems to be a common theme these days, especially with ICOs in the current market with all these new platforms. Everybody's kind of taking, it seems, this interoperability approach of, hey, we're going to maybe launch on Ethereum or launch on Neo, but we're totally open to new platforms in the future. So it's good to see you guys sort of following that similar trend and keeping things open so you can build this on the best platform possible.
Yeah, and that's been our approach. We really believe in the solution itself. We're not trying to just rush out into the market with an ICO. So we have the investors that are in our private sale right now are very patient and kind of in for the long term. So we don't feel the need to rush out and issue a token and get on 100 exchanges until we have the thing right. And that we can build for a long-term kind of substantive use case of our technology and the token itself.
That's smart. Yeah, absolutely. Looking at your white paper here, your private presale, as you mentioned, started on April 16th. You've got the public presale starting on June 1st. Crowd sale starting on July 1st. If there are any folks interested in contributing to the private presale, what's the best way for them to do that?
I think the best thing is just to go to our website, nursetoken.io, and there's a whitelist link there to click and put your info in, and we'll be reaching out to you quickly.
Wonderful. And then finally from us, what is the Blockchain Healthcare Alliance that you all mentioned?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It is our belief that because of the current status quo, it'll be important for these new blockchain companies to bind together as a bigger force. Is we'll have a better adoption if we can combine our networks with each other. And so we've been talking with Brett Blackman of HealthSplash and Aman Quadri with AmChart and we have several more on our website, but to basically share each other's networks and make introductions with our hospital partners. We all have, hundreds of hospital partners in our businesses currently. And so we're wanting to create a bigger, let's just say bigger force together, combined, we're stronger kind of thing. So we all decided to create an alliance, and
Right.
NurseToken is committed to also bringing more companies into the alliance that would be help adoption of the NurseToken and into the community, and has committed some funds to do that as well.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. It sounds like you'll have a lot of exciting things coming up this year and into the future. Your roadmap goes past 2020. So we're very excited to see where NurseToken goes. We wish you all the best of luck. It sounds like you all are doing some really fantastic things, not just here in the United States or kind of one region focus, but globally. So that's great to hear. Is there any other piece of information that you want to relay to our listeners about NurseToken, or maybe the best way to get a hold of you guys on Twitter or on the website?
Yes. Well, first of all, I wanted to say that International Nurses Day is May 12th, and National Nurses Day is May 6th. The Nurse Week is May 6th through 12th. So please honor your nurses, and if you want to do that through NurseToken, we'd be super grateful for that. Yes, you can go to our Telegram group, NurseToken, and we're engaged there. We have about 8,000 followers and growing, as well as we have on Twitter and
Facebook, all that stuff.
Facebook as well. We have, I think, 8,000 or so on Facebook as well.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. One thing I'll mention before we go, one of my friends from my hometown, Megan, is a nurse, and she talks about this shortage all the time. So for her sake, where she's working, 2 and 3 shifts back to back, I hope you guys solve this problem. So thanks so much for being on the show, and we wish you the best of luck with your ICO and everything moving forward.
Excellent. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I sincerely appreciate it. If you'd like to request someone to be on the podcast in the future, tweet us at ICO Alert and let us know. Most of our guests are requests from listeners just like you, so we review every single recommendation that comes through in our Twitter feed. We'll look at everything. So if there's a lesser-known project that you think we should cover, let us know. Maybe we'll have them on the podcast. If you haven't already, please do subscribe and be the first to hear our new episodes. And also, don't forget to check out ICOAlert.com to see the only comprehensive list of active and upcoming ICOs. I'm your host, Robert Finch, and I'll be back next week with a brand new episode.